Hi folks, welcome back. And buckle up, because if you thought Clown World couldn't get any more surreal, Democrats just said, hold my hormone blockers. See, we're living in a moment where the left wants to abolish ICE, defund the police, and apparently refund the pimps. While Diddy walks away from trafficking charges like it's just another remix, Democrats in office are out here fantasizing about turning your neighborhood into one big taxpayer-funded sleepover commune. It's a political cult with no God, no guilt, and no grasp on reality. Just vibes, victims, and virtue signals. In this episode, we're diving headfirst into the upside-down logic of modern progressivism, where justice is selective, borders are optional, and somehow the people running our cities think property rights are colonialism. Starting out with Zoran Mamdani.
Toward the Vienna model, we'll have to go beyond the market. We can establish community land trusts to gradually buy up housing on the private market and convert it to community ownership. We can give tenants a right of first refusal to buy out their landlords when buildings go up for sale. And we can fully commit to a new era of social housing, ending subsidies for luxury housing development and using our wealth to build beautiful, high-quality social housing projects that offer good homes and strong communities to everyone. We won't decommodify housing overnight, but we know what we have to do, and we have history to guide us.
And that history is the Bolshevik Revolution. Now, folks, in case you're like me and you're keeping tabs on Mamdani's actual agenda, let's do a quick rundown. He wants to create government-run grocery stores, seize the means of production, and now orchestrate land grabs to build state-sponsored communes. Democrats will tell you this is just democratic socialism, which at this point is Mao's revolution without the murder. Well, yet. But here's a deeper issue. This isn't just fringe rhetoric anymore. It's the logical end of a worldview that treats private property as oppression and the free market as a threat. Underneath the polished slogans about community and equity and Mamdani's slimy smile is a deep hostility toward individual autonomy, ownership, and the very idea of earned success. These aren't policies. They're tools to consolidate power by redefining rights as government-issued privileges. When the state owns your home, your job, your food, your healthcare, guess what? They also own you. And you don't live in a community, you live in a cage. What we're seeing is the attempted reprogramming of the American dream, turning aspiration into entitlement and property into propaganda. And the most chilling part, this isn't happening in secret. It's being proudly announced on public platforms by elected officials, cheered on by activist media, and slowly normalized by a generation trained to fear freedom and worship the collective. And the media is doing a terrific job selling this. These guys, you got to hand it to them. They could sell sand in the Mojave Desert.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio is hailing the end of USAID, the nation's largest foreign aid agency, even as a new analysis finds that its closure could contribute to some 14 million deaths in the next 5 years.
This is terrific. CNN makes an outrageous hypothetical claim that 14 million deaths over 5 years by closing USAID without naming the source of their so-called analysis. If they're not actively trying to look like a PR arm of the CIA, they're doing a terrible job hiding it. But this moment goes deeper than lazy journalism or anonymous fear-mongering. It reflects the left's long-standing moral sleight of hand that American power is only righteous when it's used to bankroll foreign bureaucracies, not secure our own border or rebuild our crumbling cities. USAID, for those who don't know, has a long track record of entanglement with regime change operations, backdoor intel work, and billions poured into programs with zero accountability. Yet the moment Trump scales it back, it's suddenly a global genocide. The real panic here isn't about lives lost, it's about power lost. The internationalist class, the globalists, are watching one of their favorite toys get taken away, and CNN is sounding the alarm, not on behalf of starving children, but on behalf of a dying ideology that sees global intervention as virtue and national interest as cruelty. Oh, won't you think of those poor little globalists? Meanwhile, Joy Reid keeps on proving that segments of the entire Democrat Party are just straight up retarded.
Ron DeSantis is still governor of Florida. He took the Comfy Couch hosts on a tour of the concentration camp that he's building in Florida in order to round up people, brown people, and throw them in a camp because he doesn't want them in Florida. Surprise, surprise, the economy of Florida is going to be severely harmed by rounding up brown people who, by the way, all over this country, Latinos are afraid to go to work. Anybody who is perceived or looks Latino is afraid to go to work. I know people.
You know, Joy, and I hesitate to call you that because you lack any bit of it. I'm somewhat of a Latino myself, and you couldn't be more wrong. Now, let's make one thing clear. The only people who are afraid to go to work right now are the ones in this country illegally who know they've broken the law to be here illegally. See, if you violate 8 U.S.C. 1325 to cross the border illegally, you're subject to deportation. If you overstay a visa, same thing. That's not racism. That's the rule of law, which the left apparently no longer cares about. And no amount of emotional manipulation or race baiting changes that. What Joy Reid is doing here isn't journalism. It's a smear campaign built on fantasy, equating standard immigration enforcement with concentration camps. It's historically illiterate, morally repugnant, and intellectually bankrupt, but it works because the media has spent years redefining lawlessness as oppression and treating borders as optional. This isn't about compassion. It's about narrative control. The left has created a moral panic to shield illegal behavior from consequence while branding anyone who enforces the law as fascist. The irony, they scream democracy while trying to nullify the democratic will of voters who want border security. It's never been more evident that this isn't a debate about policy. It's a proxy war over whether America gets to exist as a sovereign nation at all.
This aggressive move to deport any brown or black person that this regime can get their hands on in order to meet Stephen Miller's 3,000 brown person a day quota. They have a literal quota that ICE is required to meet, which is the reason why they are stopping and frisking particularly brown people, but brown and black people anywhere they can get them. Dodger Stadium, the parking lot at Disneyland, at restaurants, Home Depots, warehouses, anywhere they can get them.
What's with Joy Reid's background? Is she sitting on the ground or did someone hit her with a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids ray? Because it sure sounds like she thinks small. When you reduce complex immigration enforcement to 3,000 brown people a day, you're not just lying, you're flattening the entire conversation into one giant race-baiting cartoon. The United States supports people based on immigration status, not skin color. That's how the law works. But the left can't admit that because their political strategy relies on convincing millions that enforcement equals oppression. What Reid is doing is pure ideological theater, weaponizing identity to delegitimize federal authority while ignoring that border enforcement is supported by a majority of Americans, including legal immigrants. This rhetoric doesn't just inflame, it erodes any honest debate about national sovereignty, legality, or public safety. It turns every ICE officer into a villain and every illegal act into a civil rights crusade. And the deeper tragedy is that this narrative, echoed across universities, media, and blue state governments, has convinced an entire generation that borders are immoral and that consequences are violence. That's not compassion, by the way. It's chaos disguised as justice. Oh, and speaking of chaos, we got some breaking news. Diddy is innocent on a bunch of different counts. Let's see what is happening.
The first verdict on count one, racketeering conspiracy. How do you find the defendant not guilty? And so now they'll move on to count two. Count two, how do you find the defendant not guilty? That is the sex trafficking of Cassandra Ventura. On count three, which is Mann Act transportation involving Cassie Ventura, guilty. Count four, sex trafficking of Jane, not guilty. Count five, Mann Act transportation of Jane, guilty. So mixed verdict here. Not guilty on 3 of the charges, guilty on 2 of the charges. Lisa, your reaction? Have the first.
Wow, so you're telling me that after all that baby oil was seized, all they could get him on was prostitution? Diddy just walked out of court with a verdict that basically says, yeah, he flew them out, but we're not sure why. Guilty of transportation, but not trafficking. So apparently he's just Uber for morally questionable vacations. Yeah, only in Democrat-run New York can you run a hip-hop empire, throw parties that make Eyes Wide Shut look tame, and end up basically convicted of bad travel logistics. Anyway, here's a little more insight into the counts he was found guilty of.
Prosecutors, when they argued that Diddy transported these women in male escorts across state lines to engage in prostitution, they pulled up a slew of flight and bank records, going line by line, in some cases to jurors, pointing out hotel stays, lengths of hotel stays. They also called in law enforcement investigators as summary witnesses to explain these lengthy, extensive records that they had pulled in this case. I think it's very interesting that these are the charges that these are the only charges that jurors found Sean Diddy Combs guilty of: transportation to engage in prostitution. And also, to argue these charges, prosecutors called male escorts to the witness stand who testified about how Diddy paid them, in some cases, hundreds to thousands of dollars to have sex with Cassie and him.
So he's facing 10 years for being a freak. Is anyone surprised that Diddy's a freak? Did no one listen to his lyrics over the last 2 decades? What's amazing to me is the selective morality. Our media and justice systems run by leftists like the one in New York will bend over backwards to protect criminals in government, shield elite predators in entertainment, and cry racism at border enforcement, but suddenly find their moral compass when a celebrity's lifestyle becomes too grotesque to ignore. The Diddy case isn't just about individual depravity. It's about a culture that glamorized it until it became inconvenient. We spent decades normalizing hypersexuality, power games, and exploitative behavior, and now we're shocked when the consequences hit court. This is what happens when a society trades virtue for voyeurism. We turn evil into entertainment until it goes too far, and then pretend we didn't see it all coming. The left has done everything in its power to move our country away from God, but ironically, the institutions they now dominate haven't abandoned moral posturing. In fact, they've repurposed it. They reject biblical truth, while legacy media, academia, and the entertainment industry still love to moralize without any sort of moral anchor. They'll scoff at scripture, mock believers, and elevate relativism as virtue, but the moment a scandal breaks or a political narrative needs fuel, they suddenly speak with the fire of Old Testament prophets. Their commandments aren't from God. They're from Twitter trends, polling data, brand optics, and, the guy down there. And in the absence of divine authority, they've installed themselves as the high priests of outrage, wielding shame not to convict hearts, but to control your life. The question now isn't whether corruption exists, it's whether we're still capable of recognizing it when it wears a designer suit and speaks the language of social justice. How long can a culture survive when its loudest moral voices have no actual moral foundation? When outrage is just always manufactured, justice is selective depending on whatever identity is trending, and truth is bent to serve the powerful. What happens to those who still believe in right and wrong, not just right now? We're being trained subtly daily to trade discernment for dopamine, to trust institutions that have betrayed us, and to mock faith while blindly following these personalities. So ask yourself, who benefits from your confusion? Who profits when you're too distracted, too demoralized, or too afraid to speak plainly? If you don't decide what you believe, someone else will. And there's only one truth, and that is that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.